So I've come on here several times and talked about, how much of a fan of, shape-shifting, I am. And that there are a couple of people that, across the interwebs, if you will, on certain websites like DeviantArt, among others, that have characters and have story series dedicated to shape-shifting, if you will, mostly dedicated to the characters, that have those powers. Now, for some odd reason, it seems to be a tradition, not just, with the fans, but, in entertainment in general, movies, shows, comics, that the person that gets these shape-shifting powers is always female. Now, I'm not saying that males don't get them. They do. That is a fact. That is indeed a fact. But it seems that the default gender that gets them is female. Now, like I've said before, I think one of the reasons is it's all because of a old myth, if you will, old urban legend, that places like Hollywood entertainment and all other means of entertainment, I've heard about, throughout the years, and is the excuse and reasoning why they decide, to go these routes. Like I said, one of the urban legends that, Hollywood and, all of entertainment goes by when it comes to, giving, certain characters or genders, powers is the female side. That's right. It's the female gender that mostly gets it. And again, this is all based off a urban legend, a myth, whatever you want to call it. The fact that the reason the females, the female gender, and I say this with all due respect, no offense, that the reason they always seem to, get these kind of powers, whether it's invisibility or in this case shape-shifting, is because, as I've said in one video talking about this, a lot of people view the females, from a, mind perspective, if you will, as more creative, if not more mischievous, as to someone that, could use these powers to do or be anything they want. If it's invisibility, they have the powers to turn themselves invisible and have fun, with their friends or with their loved ones, if you catch my drift. Or in the case of, let's say, China Phillips' character in the Invisible Kid movie, do a little bit of a strip tease, to where, they strip off the clothes down to the undies, and then the undies come off, and then there's nothing there. And when it comes to shape-shifting, for some odd reason, like I said, the female gender is always chosen to go this route as well. And again, like I said, I think it's mostly due to the fact that according to urban legend, or Hollywood legend, basically, the female mind is more creative and can be more mischievous. Now, how this has to relate to this video and to those that I follow on patreon.com who basically, base a lot of the stories, and I mean a lot of the stories, on this trope, on this, like I said, what this has to do with, this video and talking about, shape-shifting, mainly the stories that those I support and follow on Patreon do that relates to it, is mainly because a lot of the female characters, protagonists, if you will, that they focus the stories on, the webcomic stories that is, they're I guess you could say SFM, CGI, 3D stories on are female. And again, I think this is because of that old myth and legend of the fact that the female mind, is more creative and mischievous than the males. I mean, again, I'm not saying the male, mindset can't be creative or mischievous, but like I said, when you take a look at history, entertainment-wise, whether it's movies, whether it's shows or comic books or whatever, the female always ends up with certain kind of powers that involve invisibility or shape-shifting. And by ending up with these powers, they basically become very, they start to become a little bit curious as to what they can do. But as the more they find out about what they can do, they start to get more creative, if not more mischievous in what, they can try out and what they can have fun with and stuff like that. And when I look at, let's say, Jovin 16 and troubletro and several others, what I see here is the same kind of thing. I see the same situation, if you will, in their stories. But what kind of stories of shape-shifting do they have where the females are the main protagonists and are given these powers for creative, if not mischievous, ways? Well, let's start with troubletro. Troubletro has a couple of stories. Three main ones. Well, actually, not three main ones, but I would actually say maybe three main ones. I'm not really sure. I have to go back and look, but I think it's 2 to 3 main ones. 2 to 3 main ones are, one of the most well-known is Pink Benefits. The other is known as Agent Pink, which I think is a spin-off of Pink Benefits. And then the other is known as Anything You Want. And they all, like I say, have to relate to shape-shifting. Agent Pink is more of an occasional story that he'll visit, where you have this secret agent, or I guess she's a secret agent or something, to where she has the ability to shapeshift into whatever, or mainly whoever she wants to be. And sometimes she shapeshifts into whoever she needs to be to, complete her mission, like go undercover or whatever. And I think it's very rarely, and I mean very rarely, that he has her shapeshift into whatever she needs to be, like inanimate-wise, to go undercover, spy and stuff, to complete, or to try to complete her mission. Now, he has used the Agent Pink series to cross over with other artists and writers' shape-shifting characters, like the most recent one called Beldrum's Revenge. He had a crossover done, or he did a crossover, I should say, between his character Agent Pink and Mr. Internet Man's character Demonica. Because Demonica is this. Like I said, the Agent Pink crossover, Beldrum's Revenge, he crossed over with Mr. Internet Man's Demonica character, who is, Demonica Veronica character, who is known as a shape-shifting succubus that is also an alter ego of mainly a recently graduated college student named Veronica, who lives on her own. And with these powers to become Demonica, she can shapeshift into whoever or whatever she wants, which is, and sometimes if you follow Mystic Makeover and Mr. Internet Man's DeviantArt page, sometimes will mostly end with her splitting herself into 2, maybe 3 different ladies with their own personalities, so to speak, and identities, and then making out with each other, thus making out with herself. So troubletro has done that, with the Agent Pink series. And like I said, rarely does he have her turn into inanimate objects or whatever to, complete a mission. It's usually into somebody else, either on the side of the antagonist to try to, complete her mission and stuff like that. Now, there are other series that he does too that involve shape-shifting. The other one that I mentioned is probably one of the longest ones he's been doing. He's been doing it for like a couple of years already. It's called Pink Benefits. Now, he's kind of had to change it up a little bit, but the main plot point about this long-running series, and you can check out some of the remasterings of it, on DeviantArt and other places. But the main focus of the series is you have two characters called Betty and I think it's Betty and Aaron, I think. No, not Betty, but Betty and Emily. Yeah, that's what it is. Betty and Emily. And both have shape-shifting powers. Both discovered, I guess in a way you could say discovered, but they both had gotten shape-shifting powers. And the run of this story so far has allowed the characters to basically, become anybody they want. Really get into, having this power and discovering how far they can go with it when it comes to basically turning into whoever they want to be. Now, I almost said whatever there because we did kind of get a glimpse. If you will, in one chapter of the story where I think it's Emily. That while she's resting, her body turns into essentially living goo. Not melted or anything, but when she wakes up, she realizes she's become pink and translucent and basically featureless. And she hears this voice in her head, which is obviously the substance or the substance or whatever it is that gave her and Betty the powers, telling her you can be more than just somebody else. And she starts testing this out by noticing that not only can she change her body from like a translucent, jelly-like appearance, but into different, elements like gold, mercury, stuff like that. And she even notices that she could, latex, if you will. And then she even notices that her arm can change shape as well into, like, let's say, a tenderloin, if you catch my drift. So we kind of get a tease there, but that's all we get from Emily, I believe. But then we get another tease of how much the powers are evolving inside of them in a more recent chapter, where Betty, I think it is, her husband knows about the powers. Her husband knows about the powers, right? So her husband, who's kind of like an agent or something like that, she helps out with these stories. She helps out with a lot of these stories and stuff. And basically, well, not stories, but a lot of his cases, if you will, in these stories. That's what I was trying to say. I got distracted because there's a cat outside, on our front lawn. But anyway, Betty has a husband that's an agent kind of that, she helps out on occasions that, kind of knows that she has these powers. He kind of knows she has these powers. So he uses this not only to, get it on with her, because when she changes into different personas to help out, she kind of gets turned on, and thus she kind of allures him into getting it on with her right then and there. That during the more recent case that they're working on, that she's helping him with, she decided, okay, well, we need to figure out more about what's going on. And they have basically the wife of their target, if you will, knocked out, unconscious in front of them. And Betty decides to try something out to see if maybe it might work, and thus it can help them, in their mission, mostly get their target's wife out of the building without any suspicion. And what do they do? Or what does Betty do? She basically she allows her body to become elastic in a very melty way. I mean, even her husband in that recent chapter is like, "Oh my God, are you melting?" And essentially, that's what she's doing. She's basically like allowing her body to melt like wax, but instead of melting to the ground, it melts in a directorial way into the mouth. Like basically, it shoots straight into the mouth of the target's wife, of the target's unconscious wife. And thus Betty allows herself to be, as the sound effect is put in wording of the story, slurped up into the body of the target's wife. And basically, she wakes, and basically after her husband asking, if she's there or not, she suddenly the target's wife's eyes open up, and Betty starts talking out of her mouth saying, "Oh my God, it worked." And then on top of that, her husband's curious, well, I don't know if it's her husband or if it's her. No, it's mostly her, I think. She's surprised that it worked, that it was successful. And then she wonders if she can still shapeshift, and she can. So now obviously the powers have evolved to the point that she and potentially Emily can turn their body into goop, go into the body of another woman or person, and inhabit that body for a time. And on top of that, still maintain their shape-shifting powers. This, of course, turns Betty on, and she has to get it on right then and there with her husband, which at first the husband's a little reluctant about, but then she teases him saying, "Hey, you're not going to get a chance at this body, ever again. This is a one-time chance." So that's enough to convince her husband to quickly, get it on with her right then and there. So anyway, they're able to basically get the target's wife's body, out of the building, into the car, into Betty's husband's car, if you will. And Betty being in the back seat, she remains in the body just a little bit longer until her husband has to say, "Are you going to finally come out of there?" And that's what she does. She goopedly comes out and returns to her normal self, or at least the form she was in previously or she possessed the target's wife's body, or entered it anyway. And then by coming back out, she changes herself into the target's wife, if you will, into the appearance of the target's wife. Like I said, she changes herself into the appearance to look exactly like the target's wife. And the reason she has to do this is she has to go undercover as the wife at the house of the suspect, the target that they're after. The only catch is that suspect target is not at home right now. He's basically out of town. Thus she has the whole mansion to herself. And that's where basically that recent chapter of Pink Benefits comes to an end. Now, the other story that troubletro works on is called Anything You Want. He's done this originally with one part. Now he's on a second part. And it evolves, ironically, this is a unique kind of story aspect, a story plot. It evolves a girl at the office getting a mysterious email. Now, we all know that if you get a mysterious email and everything, that, well, it could be a scam, because, they just want certain information and all that, right? Well, in this case, she looks at this, notices that, it looks legit, but is questionable about it. So she does what it suggests, and the next thing she knows, she checks her bank account, and she notices she's got all this money in her account. She notices she's got all this money in her account. Like I said, she notices she's got all this money in her account. But what's interesting about it is when she does all this, she suddenly notices that one of the quirks about this, according to the email she got, was she now has the ability to become anything or anyone she wants. In other words, she can shapeshift. And of course, at first she doesn't believe it until basically she notices, one of her co-workers, and how the figure is. And she wishes that she could be that way, or at least part of her could be that way. And all of a sudden, that certain part of her that she wishes could be that way suddenly changes. And if you kind of get the idea of what part I'm talking about, I don't think I have to go into any more detail. If you catch my drift. So she is just surprised in all that. She is just surprised in everything that she suddenly has this ability. Now, at first she kind of brushes us off, thinking, oh, it's just my imagination, I must have been seeing things, until again, she sees something, and all of a sudden, what she sees, on another co-worker's body, or the same one, suddenly part of hers changes in that manner. And thus, after these few moments, curiosity, of course, gets the best of her. So what she does is she ends up going into the ladies' room and thinking, okay, let's see if this is true. And she thinks of, certain parts of herself to change. So she changes her hair coloring, which is one of the more, I guess, first things that a character does, male or female. And they notice, not they, but she notices, oh my God, it did change. So she experiments more to the point that she's like, okay, if this is real, let's see if I can become my co-worker. And lo and behold, she ends up becoming her co-worker. And the rest pretty much is history as she starts noticing, oh my God, I got the power of a shapeshifter. I can actually be whoever I want to be. And not only can she be whoever she wants to be, but she could also kind of take on the persona. In other words, she can become that person. And this recent run of it kind of came to an end, if you will, recently. It recently came to an end where she ended up turning herself into basically a copy of her best friend. She basically changed herself into her best friend, if you will. She changed herself into her best friend. And by changing herself into her best friend, she kind of had a good time with her husband, because her husband didn't know. I mean, she had gone, basically, long story short, she had gone to visit her friend and her best friend's husband, the couple, if you will, to spend time. And unbeknownst to her friend, she turned into basically her twin and had a good time, if you catch my drift, with her husband. I know it all sounds kind of weird and everything, but that's pretty much true. It's pretty much the truth. Now, with that said, those basically are the only stories so far from a shape-shifting perspective that troubletro is really focusing his Patreon on right now, as far as pledges go and everything, and wanting and giving people an opportunity, depending on the pledge, to kind of see what he has in store, like what is next on the list, if you catch my drift. But like I said, he's not the only one either. There's another one, of course, that's Jovan 16, Jovan 16. I think that's how it's pronounced. But Jovan 16 is also known for doing this, and they got a little bit more under the belt than troubletro. Probably just about the same amount, but I'd say they got one more over them in a sense. And it's really interesting of how different, how similar the creative styles are between the two, but also how different they are. And you could tell that Jovan16 takes inspiration from Mr. Internet Man's Mystic Makeover series with his style of storytelling. You could definitely see that. For example, his main one that he focuses on, that he's about at almost, and I say almost 400 pages, if not already there, is Nano-Shift or Nanoshift, that I recently did a WIP review on here on my channel. And the main character there that has these abilities is named Jay. That's J-A-E, Jay. And Jay basically, thanks to being pretty much incorporated, if you will, or basically injected with these liquid nanobots that basically turned her body into a living liquefied nanobot machine or persona, Jay now has the ability to become whoever, or in some cases, like I said, these liquid nanobots that she gets pretty much injected with, and thus turns her body into a living nano body, if you will, a living, home of liquid nanobots. Allows her to basically have the power to not only shapeshift into whoever she wants, but into whatever she wants. And as I said in the review, this is very much exemplified. Like I said, this is very much exemplified in the more recent chapter that Jovan16 put down, where Jay, that's again J-A-E, turns herself into a car. I mean, she even states in the panel where she's doing this transformation that this is the biggest change she's ever put herself through. Because the most recent one, before that, was where she turned herself into a motorcycle, but she also appeared on top of the motorcycle riding it. And then the other closest of being inanimate, if you will, was when she turned herself into goop, basically into a liquid, upon her, sorry about that, I was just thinking about what I was going to say there, upon her arrival out of the, I guess you could say, matrix of her mind, which was, which was basically Jovan16's way in story of explaining, to us from Jay's point of view, from herself to herself, of what she is now capable of. And the self that explains it to her is in the form of the nanobots, the liquid nanobots and all that. So yeah, Jay basically, like I said, because of these, liquid nanobots, now has the ability to become whoever or whatever she wants to be. And she actually embraces it a lot. She really, gets into it, pretty much throughout the course of the story, even to the point that, like I said in the recent review, she loves to be liquid. Like after she brings her friends to their destination as a car, that instead of changing back into a human, she decides to liquefy into a puddle of goop to relax, to kind of take a break, and even pleasurably says that this is the best feeling she's ever had. So I guess one of the directives that Jovan16 is taking in his stories, or will, at least for right now, with a character that has these powers, is the ability to turn into liquid, to kind of be, relaxed or kind of get into a certain mood and stuff like that. So, yeah, she has the power, like I said, she has the powers to do that now, thanks to these liquid nanobots. But what's even more interesting is when she starts discovering, thanks to the nanobots themselves, of what she's capable of doing, that, the first time she discovers this is when, pretty much the nanobots, answer her request. And her request basically is she wishes she could share this ability and its, very pleasurable anatomy, hold on for a sec. that she could share this powers ability, its pleasurable amenities with somebody, and the nanobots pretty much answer her call when they form basically into a copy of her original self, and then change into one of her more, I guess as they put it, favorable disguises or shapes that she likes to be, which is kind of a very cyberpunk-like look to her, very cyberpunk, seductress kind of look to her, I should say. And what's interesting about this portion, when, she starts discovering what she's capable of thanks to her twin, created by the nanobots, what's interesting is how both of the characters, both of these new disguises she's in, starts to refer to Jay in third person. In other words, they start to refer to her as, somebody entirely different that they know they're a part of, that they came from. But like I say, they refer to her in third person as if they're their own individuals, which technically they are, I guess, for that moment. But again, you could tell where, someone like Jovan16 takes inspiration from Mr. Internet Man and his Mystic Makeover series, because like I said earlier, one of the things about the Mystic Makeover series that, made it so popular with the Demonica Veronica character is the fact that, when Demonica Veronica would split, when Veronica would become Demonica, she would split into, sometimes she would split into 2, maybe 3, perhaps even at most 4 different copies of herself, and basically 3 or 4 different clones of herself. And then she would change herself basically, through those twins, those clones, into different women who, surprisingly, like I said earlier, would have their own individual personalities, but be aware of where they came. So you can kind of see that influence, in that portion of the story, which is around, I think, which is around page 320, because he did list them, he did number them, page 320 to about 340, 350 or something like that. So, he did list them by number, so if you want to see exactly what I'm talking about, if you choose to pledge to him, you can find it there. But yeah, he's numbered them to the point that between 320 and 350 at most. So you can see that inspiration. But yeah, just like I said in the review, pretty much, she now has the ability to become anyone or anything she wants. And one of her most pleasurable things to do to kind of relax after doing so much is to liquefy. So there's that. And I think it's cool. And I think where we left off is going to get a lot more interesting. And I think the friends, basically Jay's powers are going to evolve a lot to the point that she's going to probably, and this is just a guess, she's probably going to, find a way to give her friends, the ability to do the same stuff that she does, but without having them go through the same process she went through to gain these powers. Like she'll probably she'll probably give them the powers by I guess temporarily allowing the clothing that she became for them to seep into the body, and thus by doing so they can have the same ability, if not temporarily. That's just a guess. Now, the other stories that he's got going are several more. One story he has is called Beach Fun. And Beach Fun actually evolves around a character called Barbara. And she has these, and not only does she have the power of shapeshifting, but it's in an early portion of, I think, the second or third part of Beach Fun, because he has it split into several parts, to where not only does she have the power of shapeshifting, but she has the ability to split herself into 2 different individuals. Because she's in disguise, because this happens when she's in the disguise of one of the persona she takes on, and then all of a sudden when she's wishing she could, do more, with her powers or something like that, that's when one of the other women she became, just suddenly splits off from her, as their own individual personality, as their own individual person. But again, both are aware, and this does surprise the girl that Barbara has become, and basically, like I said, both are aware of who they are part of, where they came from. But you can kind of tell, in a sense, that Barbara is, still inhabiting both minds of these women that she split off into, to the point that she wishes this will not end. Like, she could just want to remain this way no matter what. And it shows how far her powers have evolved, to the point that not only could she shapeshift into other different women, even split apart, but she's also able to go back to her normal form, even when she's split apart. But what's interesting is how the recent chapters ended, and that is the fact that they encountered these two guys, unaware of who they're about to encounter, because apparently at the end of one chapter, Barbara finds out that the guy she was with is a shapeshifter himself, but it's somebody she knows. And the same thing with her Janelle persona. Janelle basically being the other part she split off into. She discovers the same thing with the guy she's run off to the beach with. So apparently this person that Barbara knows has followed her to the beach. Now here's the thing. I haven't read most of the story, but apparently they have played a significant role in her having these powers, and maybe the reason that they followed her is because they wanted to see if exactly, maybe the curiosity was right about what she would do with these powers if given them. Now, with that said, that's pretty much what the story is, for Beach Fun. Now, another story, hold on for a sec. Now, another story he does is called Brianna's New Life, or A Secret Life, one of them. And again, it focuses on a character called Brianna, who has the powers to shapeshift, and she uses this to become any different kind of woman she wants to be. And not only does she take on the look of the woman she wants to be, even if it's someone completely original, but she also takes on a persona for them as well. She takes on a persona to the point that the persona takes over as the main talker, while she goes into the mind of basically into the passenger side of the mind, and is like the main thinker. Like the thought bubbles come out and you read what she's saying, but it's the person she's become that's the main talker. That's the main talker point, via mouth. So there's that. And he's been doing that for quite some time, if you will. And she's enjoying it. She's enjoying it and everything. She has her intimate moments with both men and women. And both the men and the women have no idea, who she really is, because she always changes into somebody different before they can pretty much figure things out or something like that, to that extent. It's a nice little story. And again, her main thing is she could shapeshift into whoever she wants. Now, we are getting the idea that she could also not only shapeshift into whoever she wants, she could also change her physique to match, that individual she wants to be. So there's kind of the potential to do more, but I'll get into that in a little bit for both of these guys, if not all people that love to do the shape-shifting stories, written or artistic, when it comes to characters. Now, Nanoshift and Brianna's Secret Life, New Life, whatever it is, are not the only stories that he works on. There is another one called Beach, I think it was Did I say Beach Fun? Yeah, I did say that. So it was Natal Shift, Beach Fun, and Brianna's Secret Life. Okay, so there's those two. There's those two. But he also has another one he works on called Amanda and Nicole. Now, he's been doing this for up to recently 10 chapters. He's on the 10th chapter. One of the things that both him and troubletro and others like to do in some cases with these stories is not only put them into chapters, but also divide those chapters into mini chapters, mini parts, if you will. And, you know, in this story, basically, in this story, and like I said, in this story, we focus on characters called both Amanda and Nicole. And what happens is Nicole, I think it is, I'm not sure, I think it's Nicole, I'm not really sure if it's her or Amanda, one of them, brings home a book that came into the possession at the library. And they don't know. And one of them, I think it's Nicole or whoever, I think it's Amanda or Nicole, whoever, whichever one of them, has no idea, you know how it got there. And even when they check it out, you know, even the librarian's like, I don't even know didn't even know this book exists. It's not on record. So she essentially, I guess, can rent it out, if not keep it, you know. And what happens is it's a book of enchantment that basically, when one of them, again, like I said, I don't know if it's Amanda or Nicole, you know, is able to read the Latin in it, basically activates the spell. And what the spell does is give them the ability to essentially change form. It essentially allows them to change form to become anyone they want. And I think it's Nicole, I believe. I think it's Nicole. Not Nicole. No, not Nicole. It's Amanda. Yeah, Amanda's the one. Now that I think of it, Amanda's the one that discovered the book. Amanda decides to test it out. You know, it was a little short test. You know, the average ones of like, okay, can I change this about me or that about me? And she finds out she can. And then Nicole follows suit by thinking, okay, let's see what I can do. You know, because she's still kind of like curious about it, still on the loop about it. So she tries it, and basically she changes like a bit of her, like she gives herself a nose job or something, and it's like, oh crap, this is pretty cool. So they don't do too much at first, but then, you know, as time goes on, basically chapter-wise for us, we get to like the third or fourth chapter, and then that's when they both start to really experiment, if you will, with what they can do, like basically fully experiment of how far they can change themselves. And basically Amanda decides to go first, and not only does she change herself to where she becomes more statuesque, but, you know, she also changes, you know, her hairstyling and everything, and decides to take it a step, and her skin tone, if you will, and then she decides to take it a step further and change herself completely, to the point that she tells her friend, you know, don't look, don't peek, because I want to make sure I need to concentrate to make sure this all works. And she starts changing, like I said, you know, more of herself, you know, not just through size, eyes or anything, or even skin tone, but she starts changing herself entirely, to the point that her voice changes and everything. She starts to sound more seductive and all that, to the point that her friend is like, Amanda, are you okay? Is that you still? And then she's like, no, not Amanda, not anymore. And then she turns around and we see what she now looks like, and she says, you can call me Marlena or something like that. Marlena, whatever. And, you know, that pretty much ends one chapter. And Nicole's kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, you've changed completely. And, you know, Amanda, now Marlena, we're just going to still call her Amanda, you know, explains that she is now someone completely new, and that Nicole basically has the ability to become someone different, you know, as well, and to try it out. So she helps her. She basically visualizes her into becoming, you know, more and everything. So she brings her up to her height, statuesque-wise, And then she helps encourage her to change the hairstyle and everything, the hair coloring, as well as her facial features, basically the whole 9 yards. And and she gets to the point to where she does look differently, but she's not different. And that the last process to really experience, being somebody different is to be that person. So she changes. Basically, she helps her change completely to the point of, okay, think about a name, think about what you want to be and all that, right? Because she's changed physically already. So she's like, okay, now the next step is the mental part. All right, so you can truly experience it. And then that's when, Nicole, that's when she goes from Nicole to Caitlin. So Amanda becomes Marlena or Marluna, and Nicole becomes Caitlin. And they just go from there. And that's basically how the story series progresses. They become, different ladies, if you will, different ladies throughout the series. Even to the point that after this is done, they go to a Halloween party or a costume party, if you will, at a fraternity. And Amanda, Marlena, whatever you want to call her, decides, hey, with these powers, we don't have to worry about what kind of costumes we could wear. We could become whatever we want to be. We could change ourselves into whatever costumes we need right here and there. So she decides, I'm going to go as a vampiress. And Nicole, still kind of unsure about what she's going to be, temporarily becomes Velma, I think. And then, while they split off to do their own things, Nicole decides, okay, instead of being Velma, she's going to be a nurse. Which, a sexy nurse, if you know what I mean. And Amanda, being a lesbian, LGBTQ, no offense, all due respect, decides to go off with a few ladies to have some fun. But what's interesting is when she goes off with these ladies, she decides, I wonder how much I have changed. And she decides to do something that, the costume she's turned herself into, is known to do in fiction, and that's hypnotize, mind control people, if you will. And she does this. She does this to one of the ladies she encounters because the lady is like, a little upset that her girlfriend is flirting with Amanda. But, after all that misunderstanding is pretty much, kind of subsided, Amanda decides to see, like I said, how far she's gone, and she uses her, abilities to hypnotize this girl. And what happens is, while she's getting on with these 3 girls, she looks at one of the girls' necks, and suddenly something snaps, something comes over her, and she bites the neck. Much to the shock and horror of the other girl there, like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then Nicole, trying to find, I guess, Amanda or find a way to the party, goes into the location where she hears some commotion, sees the result and everything, sees the result of what happened, kind of gets the explanation about what occurred, and then says, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of this. I'm a nurse. And again, what's funny is you see her thought bubbles going like, wait a minute, did I say I'm a nurse? And then she starts administrating a little bit of medical procedure of like, okay, she's still breathing, to see whether or not she's still alive or breathing, and she is. And that, the wounds are not too bad. No arteries were punctured or anything like that. And it gets to a point that basically the girl that got bit does wake up. She's like, whoa, what happened? And, Nicole has to explain, the situation in medical terms. And she says, just take her to a hospital, I'm going to go look for this individual, which kind of throws off the 2 ladies. Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about at the hospital? And she's like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to go take care of the situation. She's going to go take care of the situation. And she does. She ends up going back to the dorm room of the apartment she shares with Amanda. Amanda changes back into her normal self. And Nicole finds her there. She's asleep, but Nicole finds her there. Wakes her up when she arrives. And she's still in her nurse outfit, and then she changes back, and then that's when both of them, or at least Nicole, kind of gets an idea of exactly what happened, because, basically she explains, exactly what the book meant by change form. It wasn't just change your form as to become like somebody else in disguise or anything, like change your looks and everything, but mainly Nicole exposits that what it meant by change form, it meant not only change your look and everything into somebody different, but to also become that person. In other words, you take on the traits and the persona of that person that you've become, or whatever you've become. So, because she even mentions that when she was, and my finger just hit the mic there, I do apologize, because she explains that when she became the nurse, as a costume, that she took on the attributes of a medical person that had medical knowledge. So anyway, long story short, they decide to get some rest to see, okay, what else we can do, what else they can do later on to kind of, use their powers still, but use them more in a controllable fashion. And then that's when Nicole starts to have this dream of getting it on with this guy. And when she's having this dream, she starts shape-shifting in her sleep. That not only is she shape-shifting in her dream, she's shape-shifting in her sleep. And it's in her dream that she kind of realizes, what if I could shape-shift into something more than just another person? Because now she's starting to, in her dream, realize, hey, I have this ability to now become more than just another person. I can become anything I want to be, any kind of, into any kind of creature and all that I want to be. So we see her doing that, and Amanda notices this in the morning. It's like, oh my God, what'd you do to yourself? And Nicole basically wakes up and kind of realizes or explains to her, look, what happened, like the previous night, we, shouldn't have happened, but if we can get more control, over these abilities, it'll be fun. So basically, long story short, Nicole decides, okay, it's her turn to embrace it a little bit by changing into somebody completely different. And then she literally helps change Amanda into somebody completely different, as well. And Amanda's like, oh my God, you helped change me? You turned me into this? And she's like, yeah, I guess, our powers go beyond just changing ourselves. We can change other people. So she changes her into a different woman and everything. And Nicole decides that now that she's disguised herself as a blonde, if you will, that instead is a sexy blonde, that instead she wants to be called Nikki. It's not Nicole anymore, it's Nikki. And then Amanda needs to take on a different name as well, in which she does, to match her persona. So they go out, and then basically, like I said, that's where the 10th chapter where we're at begins, when they're walking about for the first time in the daylight as two different people. Like, in other words, people won't know that, it's really them, those that they bump into, because they've changed. Not just in, look, but in personality and all that as well. And like I said, that's where the 10th chapter ends. And I think they're going to another party or something like that, to where hopefully they'll be a little bit more careful. Now, the reason I bring all this up basically is due to the fact that with Jovan 16, with the Nano Shift, Nano Shift, Beach Fun, Amanda and Nicole, I think, and what else did I say? Like I said, the reason I bring this up for when it comes to Jovan 16 and Nano Shift, Brianna's Secret Life, Amanda and Nicole and Beach Fun, and Trouble TROs, Pink Benefits, Anything You Want, and Agent Pink, amongst others. Like I said, when you look at Jovan 16, you can definitely see the inspiration from Mr. Internet Man's Mystic Makeover series, even when it comes to another character he does on occasions with some stories, and that's his main character, his tutorial character called Amber. And Amber first started out as just written stories of a character that had shape-shifting abilities, but now has become more than just that. We kind of see some issues of webcomics, if you will, CGI, SFM, 3D webcomics, based around the character as well. Now, with that said, excuse me there. Now, with that said and everything, as I was mentioning, I was just checking something there. Amber, like I said, was a character that started as a written story and then evolved into a SFM, CGI, 3D webcomic, to the point that one of the more recent webcomics he did on her was basically obviously inspired by Mystic Makeover, because what she does is we see her, and I put this up on I put part of this up on my YouTube channel. I'll link it at the end here, where basically Amber is sitting on a throne with two guys at the side of her. The two guys vanish, and then Amber decides she wants to show us something by trying a new ability that she's been enjoying very immensely and pleasurably. So Amber basically decides to start melting into a puddle of goop, which she does, explaining how sensationally pleasurable it is to be in this form, to be in what she considers a natural state. But then she decides to rise up a little bit, and even comments, as good as, this feeling is for one body, what would it be like to share it into three, or share it with three different bodies, or split it into three different bodies? And as a result, we see these three different ladies pop up, and, act, as basically the servants, if you will, of Amber, basically as the three different servants of Amber, although they are Amber, but split into three different bodies. And they basically pretty much praise Amber for who she is, call her the mistress, and then of course it ends with them starting to make out with each other, thus Amber making out with herself. So that's how that ends. But again, the reason I bring up these stories, mostly like with Jovan 16, is, as I mentioned, you could see the inspiration that Mystic Makeover, Mr. Internet Man, has had on these stories, because you see the similar traits. Like with Nano Shift, you see it with Beach Fun, you see it with the Amber webcomics and stories, you see it. And somewhat you see the influence in Amanda and Nicole as well as in Brianna's Secret Life, to where the inspiration there is when they become somebody different, they take on the persona of that person as well, as well. In other words, they change, who they are completely, name and everything, to where, like I said, when Amanda decided to do that one final do that one last opportunity to see how far she could go with their powers, that she basically, when her voice changed, she told Nicole, no, not Amanda, not anymore. And then she turns around and says, you can call me Maluna or Malena, whatever. That's inspiration from Mystic Makeover. You see the same, like I said, with Brianna when she does what she does. Basically, that inspiration that Jovan 16 gets from Mystic Makeover in Mr. Internet Man is the fact that these characters that have this ability become not just somebody different in feature, but become someone different in personality and name. even though they know who they really are, they let the new life, the new persona come to the forefront, while the real them is in the passenger seat just enjoying the ride, if you catch my drift. Now, troubletro does take inspiration as well, there's no doubt. He wouldn't be crossing over with the Demonica character in one of the Agent Pink stories that he did. He wouldn't be doing that. So he does take inspiration too, there's no doubt. I think the inspiration he's got with the Pink Benefits, where you see both Emily and now Betty being able to liquefy the bodies into different kind of elements, if you will, like with Betty recently being able to liquefy her body to temporarily take over the body of their target's wife and still maintain her shape-shifting abilities as well. The same with Emily, who discovers she has the ability to not only become different slime-like, goo-like elements, and everything still in her body, but it's featureless. But she starts discovering that she can manipulate the shape of her hands and feet into whatever she needs as well. And when I look at this, and I know this audio video has been going long, so I do apologize, but when I look at this, I look at the potential of how much further they can go. And we've seen pretty much, a lot of us that do follow them, we have seen how far, not how far, but we have seen the teases of these characters being able to do a lot more than they're letting on. They could do a lot more than what's being shown. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that, with every passing day or every passing, week, that, these stories are published, for the Patreon pledgers, if not potentially published for free for those that have the access and the ability to, and the time, if you will, to want to download all the images and say, okay, free comic website that has no issues, here's NanoShift up to date, or here's Brianna's Secret Life up to date, or here's this and here's that. So long story short, again, you see the potential, you see the potential and ability of how much farther they can go with these characters in story and the powers. And to me, when I look at, let's say NanoShift, like I said, I believe one of the most next logical steps is, J, that's J-A-E again, that's J-A-E. I think one of the more logical steps next for J is for her to basically temporarily find a way to give her friends the same ability she has. In other words, like I say, allow the material that she's become, that she coded her friends in, to disguise them to look differently. She should have that ability, she should have, that seep into the bodies and thus give them the ability temporarily to do exactly what she does. And then maybe we end up with a fusion. Who knows? Maybe we end up with a fusion. Who knows? So I believe that will be the next step. I really do. But with the way Jovan 16 is describing, how she, is evolving into these powers to the point that she can now become vehicles and all that, as well as puddle of goop, if you will. I could see her not only doing a fusion with her friends after giving them temporarily the ability by having parts of her seep into the bodies, because again, she coded them in her to disguise them. But I can also see her turning into different elements as well, not just inanimate objects like cars and all that, or weapons, or motorcycles, or even, like I say, puddle of goop. I could also see her turning into different elements of, the weather. Like I could see her turning into, one of the things that Mr. Internet Man's Demonica character is known for doing is turning into a mist, right? So I could see her turning into some kind of mist, maybe in a club to kind of distract from any potential trouble, and then turning herself into maybe a fog from that mist. Like, in other words, she becomes a mist, and then she expands it into a fog-like texture that would allow maybe her friends to get out of there. Or she'll turn into a mist, rise up to the ceiling, turn into a big old cloud, and start raining down. I could see that being like the next logical step for the Jay's character, in the story. One, like I said, she allows her friends to temporarily have the ability she has by allowing, herself that she coded them in to seep into their bodies to give them that ability. I could see her being able to shapeshift, transform, if you will, into different elements like mist or rain or whatever. So I could see that. And I could see from an inanimate, standpoint, I could see her maybe, because she alludes to the fact being a car is the biggest change she's ever gone through. I think that's just a sign of what she's capable of, what she's really going to pull off in the future. And I could see her, maybe for the protection of herself and her friends, I could see her becoming a freaking building. I could see that. Because one of the things I've noticed in the Metamorphosized to Malleability series, with the evolution of Briella's powers there, is she can basically take a big hunk of herself and leave it somewhere without any problems, without any issues. So there's that. So there's that and everything. And it shows you how far, like I say, her powers have come. How far they've evolved, if you catch my drift. And on top of that, she's still able to act normally, if you get what I'm saying. Now, getting on to, like I said, with Jay and all that, and with NanoShift, again, like I said, I could see that potentially happening here, where Jay, to protect herself and her friends from any potential trouble, will take them out to a location, or take them out to a certain part of the city, where no one's around. And like I said, we get a tease of the fact that, she's never transformed herself into anything big like a car before. So I could see that being, like I said, a hint of she's going to attempt something bigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if that something bigger is either go out into the middle of nowhere, and turn herself into a big old house, and she's still able to maintain her form without any problem. That's her and her friends are able to live in peace and be able to have as much fun, if you catch my drift, that they want. So I could see that. Now, will it happen? We'll have to see. We still got time. We still got time and everything. Speaking of potential for stories to get even better, Amanda and Nicole. Now, like I said, in one of the more recent chapters before chapter 10, it was shown that Nicole, in her dream, was not only turning into different things for the guy of her dreams that she was dreaming of to impress him with, but she was now discovering that she could become more than that. She could become different fantasy creatures and all that. Or creatures of myth, if you catch my drift. So she tells Amanda this, and Amanda, who is LGBTQ, is thinking, oh, okay, this is interesting. This might lead to something, because the one little subplot they have that Jovan 16 has in the Amanda and Nicole series is Nicole wants to try to get it on with her friend. Even though her friend is straight, Nicole still wants to try to get that opportunity, and it looks like they're hinting towards that now, or it looks like Jovan 16 is hinting towards that right now with what's going on. With basically Nicole basically telling Amanda, or telling Amanda the fact that they could become more than what they are, as well as kind of giving off the vibes that she might consider, now that they know they can become more than what they are, or instead of, basically instead of turning into different women, that she might consider giving her that moment. She might. Or she at least is strongly considering it. And on top of that, I think they do have the ability to go, I do think that story with Amanda and Nicole does have the ability to go a lot further. Because obviously it seems, because one of the things, in the story, at least at the beginning, that we kind of get introduced to is these different women, in a dream that Nicole is having. And Nicole, hold on for a second, I'm just doing something here. Nicole basically, I was shutting the blinds on my back door here. But yeah, basically Nicole, at the beginning has this dream about these two girls she meets up with, and in her dream she turns into a different woman. She becomes a different person, a lifeguard and all that. And it almost seems like those two women in the dream that she saw on the beach might have something to do with what's going on. So my thought process is the more this storyline goes around, the more we're going to start finding out that the reason Amanda and Nicole have these powers is because of these two ladies, and these two ladies are the reason the book showed up in the library, unrecorded, if you will, unrecorded, and thus allowed both Amanda and Nicole to become, shapeshifters themselves. And I think that librarian might be more about, or might know more about what's going on than she would let on. So I got a feeling that the further that story goes on, we're going to get introduced more so to those characters, as time goes, about. I wouldn't be surprised if the twist is at the end, both Amanda and Nicole turn into those characters, and those characters take over completely and be like, and basically start kind of like grinning at the fact or laughing at the fact that it's so good to be free again, and after all this time, and that they just need to find a couple of people to succor them, or to succor into freeing them from their imprisonment, if you catch my drift. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see if that's a twist that happens. Not saying it will. Not saying it will, but we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait to see if that's a twist that happens. Now, with that said, as I mentioned, I can see more going on, because like I say, the hint that's given by Nicole's dream and what she shows Amanda in the real world is they can become more, and that if she is hinting at finally letting Amanda have her moment with her, that being able to become more than just other women is pretty much a step in that direction. I mean, I would like to see them turn into goo creatures, believe it or not. Yeah, I would love to see them finally get that moment, and they turn into both slime girl like creatures, and they get it on to the point that basically they mix into each other, maybe. And maybe we get a temporary fusion, and we get Amanda Cole, or Amanda Cole, or Nicolanda, or something like that. Some kind of a comprising of both names. But I could see that happening, and I think that might be the direction he goes in further chapters of the Amanda and Nicole deal. As far as Beach Fun goes, Beach Fun I can see getting a lot more interesting, because we're going to get introduced to this individual that Barbara knows, and maybe we'll find out that the reason Barbara has these powers is because basically this person wanted to see exactly how far she would take these powers, of shapeshifting. That if she would allow herself to be, let go, if you will, to the point that she'll split herself into multiple persons just to go out and have fun without basically being herself. It might be a be true to yourself story, I don't know. But it's interesting. It's really interesting. And obviously it looks like we're heading towards some LGBTQ moments on both Barbara's and Janelle's side of things, if you catch my drift. But again, they could do a lot more. They could do a lot more. And I think that's why you're suddenly seeing these individuals showing themselves to Janelle and Barbara as shapeshifters themselves, to prove, hey, you can do more than just be other women. You can do more than that. You can become more than that. And I think that's where we are heading. I think that's where we are heading. With Joven 16's story there. And Amber, that's up in the air. That's kind of an occasional deal, but I would love to see more of slime girl, melty amber, if you will, in the future. But yeah, again, with Joven 16, you can tell they take heavy inspiration from Mr. Internet Man's series of Mystic Makeover. As far as troubletro goes, yeah, like I say, they take inspiration too, there's no doubt. But I can see a lot more happening. If you will. Like I said, when you look at Pink Benefits and the fact that both Emily and Betty have discovered that they could shapeshift into more than just regular women. They could turn into different elements and whatever they can melt and all that. I expect those two to basically have another intimate moment between them. Like, it looks like we're heading towards them meeting up with each other at the mansion, where Betty's at, and them having an intimate moment there, and that might be where they go a little bit more crazy. Like, Betty explains what she did, then that opens Emily up to explain what she woke up to as, and then maybe, they have their moment, and they start, shape-shifting into different things besides just women, as they're getting it on. It might be an interesting take, and it might take a lot of work to do, but I could see that happening. As far as the Anything You Want series, the second part recently ended, so we're on to potentially a third part, but what that third part has to offer is up in the air, because we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what that third part is going to be. For all we know, that third part potentially could just be a repeat of the other one, because again, you have this girl who has this ability to, thanks to a mysterious benefactor giving her money and everything, to become any woman she wants to be. But I think the potential to take it even further, is there. And I truly believe that in the third part, troubletro hopefully will be doing that. He'll be taking it to that next level, to where this woman realizes, I wonder, can I shapeshift into more than just another woman or even another guy? And then that's where the next, plot point of Anything You Want, comes into play. Like her discovering, I wonder if I can become more than just, another person and all that. So hopefully that gets explored, and maybe in that third part we see her become inanimate objects, her turn into a slime girl or a goo girl that melts into a puddle, and maybe even enjoys the melting part. We'll have to see. But those are things I think, and honestly, in my opinion, and again, I know this audio video has gone long, those are things I believe they should look into. Those are things I honestly believe they should look into, they should embrace, and really, put into the story down the line. I really do. But anyway, though, guys, like I said, I know this thing has gone too long, but I just wanted to talk about this because, it seems that shape-shifting, mostly females, getting female shapeshifters, and I say that with all due respect, no offense, are becoming the norm, becoming the very popular norm around, fan fiction, original fiction, story writing, and, SFM, 3D webcomic, creation, as well as even in Hollywood itself. And to me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're going to potentially get like a female-centric Plastic Man, Plastic Woman movie. We're getting the Metal Men, where one of the main aspects of the Metal Men is they're able to shapeshift. Mostly Platinum is able to do that a lot. So, to me, it's just, the beginning of something big. It's the beginning of something big. And I cannot wait to see what's next in store when it comes to this kind of situation, both female and male. I'll put it that way, both female and male, because it'll be interesting to see how far they're willing to go. But, I just also wanted to come on here and tell you about these stories that I believe you should check out on patreon.com, at Joven16's Patreon and troubletro's Patreon. I think you will enjoy them. They put a lot of hard work and effort into them. And also, these are just, things I would like to see as well in the future. down the line. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment down below. Live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Check me out at the Teespring store. Also check me out at BW Roses Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. I am close to 300 podcast episode, guys. This might be one of them. As well as if you listen to me on Anchor.fm, listener support is open if you want to help support there. Also check me out at BW Roses on VENMO. Also check me out at Patreon.com, like I said, BW Roses. To support on the $1 or $3 tier. Also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. So until next time, guys, let me know what your thoughts are. And I am out. Excuse me there.